is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the tight end / receiver out of Florida. This is Kyle Pitts, and whether or not the Lions should consider drafting him in the first round or at pick number 7. Let's get it started.
You know, I got to shout out DoseOfDion, man, because it was actually the first time I went live on YouTube. And, you know, guys don't know DoseOfDion. He put out a lot of good content for the Detroit Lions.
And welcome everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we're talking about Kyle Pitts in today's video, man. Kyle Pitts has been picking up a lot of steam recently in the Lions community, which is interesting because about a week ago, I was planning to do a video on Kyle Pitts where I talked about him, how he would fit for the team, you know, what I like, what I don't like about his game. But then that video stopped. I actually still have a lot of clips from that video, but I stopped that video because there was some news and I started focusing on the news and I've kind of got sidetracked and I've just haven't remembered really to do the Kyle Pitts video because now the offseason's picking up with free agency coming soon. It's like, okay, yeah, I kind of just moved on from the draft stuff and we'll get back to it. But Kyle Pitts, his name has just been drawing so much popularity recently in the Lions community, man. I mean, it's like everybody's, oh, Kyle Pitts taking his Calvin and this stuff. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. So this probably is the best time to talk about Kyle Pitts because people like him. They're excited for this guy. I don't know what group you're in. You may be in the group that say, I don't want a receiver. I don't want a weapon in the first round. I want to wait on those. And I'm kind of in that group a little bit too, so I'm kind of with you there. Like, I'm fine with waiting on that. But, you know, just like you may have that thought, someone else may have the thought they need a weapon in the first round. And honestly, just like we did with offensive linemen, quarterbacks, you got to know who's available, right? You want to know who's out there because we don't know what Brad Holmes is going to do, but we want to know, like, when they select whoever they select, we want to know about that player and not be completely, like, shocked, like, wait, who in the world is this guy? It's good to know your options because we really don't know history on Brad Holmes or what he's looking to do. Plus, free agency hasn't kicked off yet, so we don't know what signings they're going to make. So, yes, this is the early stages. So, instead of focusing on what our team needs are and filling that out, let's just focus on Kyle Pitts specifically. That way this video can age well. Anthony Lynn's past as an offensive coordinator. Not necessarily what our holes are right now because, yes, while we do have holes at receiver, we have holes at linebacker, holes here, holes there. By the end of free agency, they may change drastically by cuts, by signings, by trades. So things change, right? Things definitely change as time goes on. So let's just specifically focus on Kyle Pitts. Now, before I start talking about Kyle Pitts' game specifically and we start going into what I like and what I don't like and how he compares to some of the other top receiver options, I first want to touch on a couple of questions I have about his scheme fit, okay? Now, I don't know what Anthony Lynn is necessarily going to do this season. I don't know. I don't know if he's going to change things up. I'm not sure. But I do have a couple of questions about how well Kyle Pitts would fit into the scheme. So when you look at tight end, because people ask me, well, what position is he? You know, what are they going to announce him as? Well, they're going to announce him as tight end because he's a tight end. Kyle Pitts is tight end. He played more tight end than the other positions. He's a tight end that can play receiver. So when you ask yourself, okay, how does he fit into the scheme? Well, the reason his name comes up as an option for the Lions isn't because he's a tight end. It comes up because he can play receiver. If he couldn't play receiver, to me, it wouldn't be a popular name for the Lions. And when people just see tight end, if they don't know Kyle Pitts, they say that doesn't make any sense. The reason that's said is because if you look at the history of Anthony Lynn, 2 tight ends haven't been that involved in the receiving game. It's usually one tight end steals the show, which is going to be TJ Hockenson, and the other tight end is not super involved. Unfortunately, that's kind of been Jesse James. No disrespect, that's just been the case with the stats. But that's what it's been historically for Anthony Lynn. One tight end takes over, the other one is not super involved. So if he was just a tight end, he wouldn't even come on the Lions' radar, I believe, because, like, why? I think you're going to get the best out of Kyle Pitts to the next level if you can get him involved as a tight end, as a slot, as an outside receiver, and you can move him around based on what the defense is showing you. If you're willing to do that. If you're not willing to move him and you're saying you're just going to be an outside receiver, that's all you're going to be, or you're not going to ever play tight end, I don't think he's going to be as dominant. I think he's going to be great. I think he can be great. I think he's a top receiver if you simply just use him as a receiver alone. But I think he's at his best when he gets the opportunities to be a mismatch. If I'm playing a team that has really good corners and they're doing a really good physical job against Kyle Pitts and my, big receivers and are kind of taking him out of the game, but I have the ability and I say, hey, I'm willing to line him up with Hockenson as a tight end and we'll go 2 tight end sets against this team because they don't have the linebackers that can match up and that opens up other options or they just dominate, then I think he makes a lot of sense. But if Anthony Lynn say, no, I'm not going to play him at tight end because I don't use tight ends like that, then I'm saying, well, I'm not getting the best out of him, because there are certain occasions where Kyle Pitts isn't as involved in certain games. He's always good. There's not a game where I saw he didn't play well, but there's certain games where he's more dominant than others because they were willing to say, hey, tight end, slot, outside, we can put you in different spots. And there's certain teams they played against that were more physical. They kind of were less of an option, plus Kyle Trask didn't always throw it to him. But I think if you're just simply limiting to one position, as a receiver, the thing with receivers, I can't put him at tight end. I can play either at slot and outside. I can base you on matchups of cornerbacks. As long as Dan Campbell is at his word, he says, hey, look, we're going to go with mismatches. And Anthony Lynn is coming into a week and he's saying, hey, look, they don't have the linebackers or safeties that can cover a 2 tight end set. So we'll go to that. Now he makes it an issue because I don't need to do him that all the time. And yes, I will use him as a receiver, but I think he's so great and he's such a matchup nightmare is because you do use him at different spots. There's big receivers out there that are athletic, right? They're out there. They're not easy to find, but they're out there. But I think that's what makes him so explosive is because I can't take Kenny and say, hey, go play tight end and be a mismatch on the line as well. He can do that. That's what makes him different. It makes him special to me. And I need to know that Anthony Lynn can use him that way because if not, I think it takes some value away. Doesn't make him not valuable and not someone that I don't consider, but he does take a little bit of value away. I don't want people to get the idea that I'm saying Kyle Pitts isn't good enough to just be a receiver at the next level. I think Kyle Pitts could strictly just play receiver and be a first-round talent and you'd be fine with that. But my point is that he is so special and so great is because he can play tight end as well and be dominant, play receiver as well and be dominant, and be a matchup nightmare because you can put him all over the field. And for the Lions, that could be perfect because they may be looking for that guy that can line up everywhere that the NFL, that you just don't really find that often in the NFL. Looking at a number 7 pick, right? I'm not comparing him to, hey, how good is he for his tight ends? I know he's a better receiving threat than tight ends, so I'm looking at him as how does he compare to receivers? But the reason that he needs to be talked about is because he may not be, in your opinion, as good as Jamar Chase as a receiver, as good as Waddle as a receiver, or as good as Devontae as a receiver, even though he brings a completely different skill set. You might just take one of those guys if you're simply looking for a receiver. But the reason that, to me, he needs to be brought up is because he's not just a receiver, he is also a tight end. But now let's talk about Kyle Pitts individually and why he's so different from other receivers because he's a tight end that plays receiver. The biggest difference about Pitts comes in size, of course, because he's a tight end. At 6'5 to 6'6, 235 to 245, he's just so much bigger than any other top receiver that we've been looked at or mocked at number 7, right? The consensus is it's Jamar Chase, Devontae, Jalen Waddle. Now, some people might throw other names in there that would change it up, but let's just stick with those 3 for the sake of this video. If you do that, he's just different from all those guys. And the biggest reason is because of size, which means that there's things that he does better than those receivers that I don't think they can replicate. And there's also things that those receivers do better than I think that he does. Catch radius, size, long wingspan. He can catch. He's got such a long area for catching a football. Now, people like to compare this guy because he's eye-catching, just like Isaiah Simmons was eye-catching because of his size and ability to play linebacker and his speed, just like Calvin Johnson. People like to compare him to Calvin. Now, he's the next Calvin. Now, I don't see him as the next Calvin, and we'll talk about that a little later. I just don't see that same kind of player. But I understand the size is there, and I understand his athletic ability to make you think of Calvin Johnson. I get that part of it. He resembles, in some ways, a Calvin Johnson type of profile, right? He has that in some ways. So it's understandable that people compare him to Calvin Johnson in that way. I don't think he's the next Calvin Johnson, but I think he's got similarities. There's certain similarities, and a lot of that comes in size. Of Calvin Johnson's size, he had things that some receivers just didn't. Catch radius was one of those. He could catch anything literally near him because he could just reach out and snag it. Now, I think what Kyle Pitts does better than most weapons in this draft, if not all of them, is adjust to the football in the air. He does a great job of either climbing the ladder if he needs to go get it. You throw it high, he can jump ball. If you throw it low, he can slide down and grab it with his athleticism. You can throw it behind him and he can continue to run his route and make the grab. He doesn't drop the ball very often. He can dive out, make some catches. His catch radius is incredible. And that's one of the biggest differences to me. But then that also brings up drops, as PFF will say, well, he didn't drop past 2020. I saw 2 personally, so yeah, PFF. I saw Missouri, and I think it was Ole Miss or Alabama. I saw 2 drops. Not easy passes. Maybe they called it as a bad pass. I don't know. But he dropped them. So I counted at least 2 drops. But he doesn't drop the ball very often. I think that's the moral of the story, is he doesn't drop the ball very often. But again, because of his size, his strengths are different. Another strength of his game is he will draw flags. It's so many flags because of his size. Now, people will say, well, he's a matchup nightmare. Why do they say that? Well, they say it because if you line him at tight end, where he played a lot, you put him at tight end, it's tough for linebackers because he has athleticism and change of direction that linebackers don't seem to really be able to keep up with it, at least most linebackers in coverage. So it's an issue. And of course, he's so big, you don't find a lot of 6'6" linebackers. It's difficult to find linebackers as big as he is that also can have that change of direction. So he's a nightmare for linebackers, and most great tight ends are. That's kind of the thought of a tight end. But then then you line him up at receiver, he's an issue because he's so much bigger than every cornerback that they have to grab him because you throw the ball up and they just can't go high point it with him because he's still athletic. He's not just stuck on the ground. He's so big, he can just draw flags because they have to grab him. Linebackers have to grab him when he comes out of a break. Corners have to grab him. Sometimes they grab him out of break, but they usually have to grab him because he's too big. And that draws pass interference, holding. He draws a lot of flags. He also draws attention. Now, Jalen Waddle will draw double teams. In a way, well, he'll get safety help over top because he's so fast that you have to worry about him. If I'm getting up on him, he can go by me. So I need safety help. If I give him space, he can go underneath, right? Kyle Pitts draws attention, not necessarily because he's going to blow by you, but because he's so big. So he's so big that he's going to draw attention. So if you line up with the linebacker, he's athletic enough to beat the linebacker, so he needs help over top. And if you line him against the corner, he's so big that he's going to need attention because one-on-one he could be a big problem because he's so physical. So that can be an issue. So he draws his attention defensive for a defense in a different way than the receivers do. The receivers draw it with speed, with route running, with quicks out of breaks, with top end speed. He's not saying he's slow, but he doesn't draw it in the same way. He just draws it in a different way, kind of similar a little bit to like a Galladay would, I would say, because Galladay didn't get separation. Galladay just could jump on top of you and catch the football. This brings me back to why they call him a matchup nightmare, is because he can at times use his quickness to burn and get separation on a slot corner or an outside corner, but a lot of times he's getting that separation on, linebackers that are in the box trying to keep up with him or safeties trying to keep up with him. But on the outside, it's less often that he's getting tons of separation on his quickness or breaking out of routes, like a Jalen Waddle or a Devontae Smith or Jamar might. He's bigger than those guys. So against corners, he's just too physical. He's too big. And route for Kyle Pitts can be deadly in the red zone, and we'll see that a little bit later. We'll see a clip of that. But as inconsistent as he can be off the release at times, his footwork is very, very clean. Unless it is a slant route, which we'll get to a little bit later. When you're running slant routes, he finds a way to get separation consistently. I don't see very often where his slant routes are taken off. He usually finds a lot of separation in that move. He's very crisp with it, setting up his defender on that quick little route. And he has to be. You have to be polished because you're not just the quickest, most athletic guy when you're 6'5", right? You have to be very polished with your footwork. So his footwork is, again, very clean footwork. Very smooth. Now, Calvin, this is where I think there's differences in Calvin's game. Well, I'm not saying Kyle Pitts isn't athletic because he is. He's projected like a 4.5, 4.6. He's quick. I get it. I've watched him play, okay? The guy breaks out of routes better than almost any tight end I've seen in college football. Probably better than any tight end I've seen in college this year. He won't be the fastest tight end in the league if you list him as tight end, but he breaks out of routes faster than most tight ends. But when you compare him to Jamar, Devontae, Waddle, to me, they break out of routes quicker. They're quicker. They're faster than he is. Honestly, you could say it's a little bit of a smaller route tree than a Jalen or a Devontae or a, Jamar has. But I guess that does make sense that he would have a smaller route tree because he's playing the tight end and receiver position, so he's playing multiple positions. He may have less routes as a receiver, but he has played the tight end position with those guys haven't. So it's something that he could probably pick up on. I think it was his footwork, he'd be fine. Thinking, well, why are you comparing this to receivers instead of tight ends? Well, the reason I'm comparing it to receivers is because for him to be on a Lions radar in the top 10, I think it's only right that I compare him to receivers rather than tight ends. Lions, I have to compare them. Right, I can't compare him to T.J. Hockenson because I'm going to use him more as a receiver, right? Well, I don't see him as Calvin Johnson because I think Calvin Johnson, you watch him in college, this guy was so fast. Talking about a Hall of Fame receiver in Calvin Johnson. And I can tell you, I don't recall a situation where the Lions felt like there was a mismatch at the tight end spot where they could take Calvin Johnson and put him at tight end. The league's definitely different now, but that's the thing that Kyle Pitts can bring, and that's why I think he needs to get opportunities there as well, and you have to be willing to mix that in if you're going to draft him this high, which is why he's in the conversation, but they just have the leg up there, while he has the leg up in size, so it's what do you prefer, right? Now, the next thing I would say is as a blocker. He can block really well compared to those receivers. You compare him to tight end, now you're saying, okay, he's not that great of a blocker, because as a run blocker, personally, I was impressed. I didn't think he'd be that good of a run blocker. You hear about, how good he's catching the ball. He's probably going to struggle as a run blocker. Thought he actually did really well as a run blocker. Yes, he's willing as a run blocker, but he's not super powerful either. He kind of has like a lanky build. So, when you're going against pass rushers, defensive ends, linebackers, you got to be pretty strong to move those guys back. He doesn't really move guys back that often. Sometimes he could be the one moved back, but he does get after it. There's effort. There's tons of effort there. As a pass blocker, I've noticed you don't really want him one-on-one with a top pass rusher because he's going to get burnt. All right, you just see it. They're too polished. Need help. You'll have to have a running back to help him. So I don't really want him in those situations. If it's third down, I'm either having him go out for a pass or you're not going to be on the field. All right, I don't want you to use you as a pass protector on third downs. College, that's fine, but next level, that's probably not where I'm using him. But again, you compare his blocking to a receiver, not be as fast in open field to go find someone to block, but he blocks arguably better. Like, you can't line up Devontae Smith on the line and say, hey, go block at the same level that Kyle Pitts can. To the quickness and speed is also yards after catch. One thing is, like, these receivers, they're so explosive and they're so scary because they catch the football, more alluding to here Devontae and more alluding to Jalen than necessarily a Jamar Chase. But they're so scary because they get the ball in their hands and they're so fast and they're quick and they're so smooth as runners that they're tough to keep up with. Typically, Jalen Waddle, when the ball's in his hands, he's scary dynamic. Okay, so is Devontae. And Jamar's not bad either. But Kyle Pitts, not as much. You know, out in the open field, he averages 6 yards after the catch. It's not bad, but it's not like, you know, he's not as dynamic or as explosive or scary in space where I just want to get it and throw a screen and let him go. You're not really doing that with Pitts, okay? Because he's just not that twitchy. You know, and a lot of that has to do because of his size. Calvin was so freakishly fast. I'm talking ridiculously fast. That he could throw a slant and he'd be gone. Here's another example. Here's one thing I love about his game is that he's a goal line threat as well. I see Kyle Pitts as a really good goal line threat. You know, Jalen, those guys can sort of be goal line threats because you can get them on drags and out of the backfield. He can be a goal line threat because you can throw a fade to him. You can throw a fade to him. I haven't seen many of those though, so, you know, and I think the one I did see, it didn't actually get completed, but you can throw a fade to him. But what I really like him is on slants. He does a really nice job of setting up his defender. One step, boom, gets to the inside. And all he has to do is he doesn't need to get a couple yards of separation to get open. All he needs is just to get you behind him. If he just gets a step, if you're to even with him, his size can just basically wall you off, like boxing you out in basketball, and he catches the ball, and it's really just impossible to get around him. And then you draw flags because you have to grab him to try to not let him catch the football, and then he's got flags. So to me, that's where he's really dominant in the goal line situations. He'll be more dominant there than those receivers because you could just throw this guy slant and he can just, you know, one-on-one, he can get you in position and he's going to catch the ball. He's got really nice hands. He doesn't get as much separation maybe, but he's really nice there. Now, again, that goes to the yards after the catch. You can catch a slant and he can get some nice yards after the grab. He won't get the same type of yards that Calvin can. 80-yard slant and score for a touchdown like Calvin could. What do you prefer? Do you prefer a guy with the size that's dominant? Another little key note I would note about his game is that I've noticed multiple occasions where this guy gets off the snap super late. Not saying that it's bad technique. He just releases like the last guy. He's like the last receiver off the snap to move. I noticed that multiple times in multiple games. I just want to point that a little out. The best way to slow down a guy like Kyle Pitts, from what I've noticed, no matter where you're covering him, whether that's when he's at tight end or outside receiver slot, wherever it is, you got to be physical with him. I think you have to be physical with him. You have to bump him right off the snap. You have to mess up the timing because I feel like if you get him a clean release, where sometimes releases are super slow, by the way, but if you give him a clean release, you can have issues. I think the best thing you can do is throw him off his timing, throw him off his route, get physical with him, because while he is big, he's kind of lanky for a tight end, so especially when he's lined up at tight end, linebackers got to be all over him, right? Inside 5 yards, you got to push this guy off his route. There's a good example against Bama of them doing that, and as an outside receiver, you got to get after him. You got to throw off the timing. That way it's not, you know, hey, one-on-one jump ball, go get it, because he'll win that most of the time. But they're just different. It just goes to this point then, who do you prefer, right? Do you prefer a guy with this size, with good speed, that can line up as a receiver, but also may need to use some tight end time as well? Or do you prefer strictly receiver, gets a lot, known for his separation, still has really good ball skills, just doesn't have the same type of size where, you know, you're not getting Waddle to throw a goal line fade to Jalen Waddle. He just won't be used that way. You're not throwing a goal line fade as often to Devontae Smith as you can Kyle Pitts. You know, they attract different things. And I think Terrell Williams is a big factor, but free agency, we'll see who they add. That's going to be a big factor as well. Before the end of this video, I know the question is going to be, would I select Kyle Pitts at number 7? Well, here's a couple of things I want to say. First off, Hunter Bryant's going to be a factor. I think Hunter Bryant, I don't think he's the same skill level, but I think there are similarities in the type of player, a tight end that can play receiver. It'll be interesting to see how involved a guy like Hunter Bryant will be next season, and how they feel about Hunter Bryant, I think, is also important. If they feel like Hunter Bryant can fit the scheme well, that tells me Kyle Pitts could as well. Hunter Bryant will be an interesting option in the next season for sure. Take this guy over anybody as just strictly a receiver, and then he can give you that option to play tight end, where I think he'll be extremely great, because I think there's going to be certain games that is dominant because he'll be on the outside. You know, certain teams will slow him down a little bit, but then you're able to put him at tight end. Now it's tough. So the biggest question for me for the Lions will be, number one, how well does he fit in his scheme? You know, how well does he fit with Jared Goff? How does he fit with the timing offense, the play action? Will Anthony Lynn use him? Will Anthony Lynn give him opportunities to play at tight end as well? But I think we're just strictly looking at player here. It's not a very hard argument to make and say that I would take this guy over any receiver in this draft. I mean, yes, he may run a 1/10 of a second slower on his 40 time than Jamar or Devontae will. He may not be as fast as Jalen. It's a different type of player, but he is so talented, and with his size, there's not a scary injury history where it's like, oh, he missed this much time. Will he come back healthy? Like, he's just balled out. And it's like, wow. I mean, if you want strictly a guy that you could just throw one-on-one balls, go up and get it, like, hey, This dude is he's just a nightmare for defenses. This is the guy. I think, you know, in terms of value all around, it's hard to find a receiver with this much value. So if you really want to get a weapon first round, I don't think you'd be making a mistake taking Kyle Pitts. I know people will say you will. I don't think you would. Goes back to what I said in the beginning. I'm one of those people that are fine with waiting on weapons. But if you do want a top weapon, this is someone that you should consider. Me personally, I'm fine with waiting through the first round and passing on these guys. But if you want a top weapon, this is someone to consider. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, for watching, and I'm out.